All right, let's get a little more practical with the thumb and fingers pattern we learned in the last lesson by putting it with a chord progression. This is going to be the chord progression we use for all of the accompaniment patterns in each module. So that's kind of cool because you're not going to have to worry about memorizing new chord or chord progressions for every pattern. It's going to be the same one over and over again. Now, the challenge that you're going to face as you learn these accompaniment patterns is adjusting your thumb to which bass note you're hitting according or depending on what chord you're playing. And I'll show you what I mean real quick. I'll play through this. Our chord progression, and I'll get to a little bit more of this later, is going to be just G, D, E minor, and C. Now, if you remember in the last lesson, I mentioned that a general rule, it's not a rule, but something that you're going to find happens a lot, is your thumb goes to the lowest root note of each chord that you're playing. You have to be able to adjust for each chord in the progression as far as your thumb as you play through that cycle of chords. And that's an accuracy issue. And if you put in the time with the thumb exercises in the last few lessons, then this is going to be a lot easier for you, but you still have to do a lot of programming to where you can go, your thumb goes right to the E string, or right to the D string, or right to the A string, depending on what chord you're playing. But this is another good step to get in that direction, to get really good at that. But the way to do this is to start off just chord by chord. And since those are the 4 chords that we're going to be using, the first few exercises in this lesson are just to play thumb and fingers with each one of those chords. So the G you already did in the last lesson. It's just your thumb on the low E string. Right? So put in some time with that and make sure you're as accurate as possible. If you need to use the folk method, that's fine. Or the anchored method. Okay, so I won't beat that dead horse too much. The next chord in the progression is a D major chord. So what happens is our little non-rule rule that we have says that we need to hit the lowest root note available in whatever chord shape with our thumb. That, in this case of a D major chord, is the open D string. So just move your thumb to the D string. Like my setup doesn't change at all. I just play a G, and then I move to a D. The only thing that changes is my thumb moves from there to here, from the E string to the D string. All right? So programming in exactly where that D string is for your thumb and finger pattern is going to be really important. Take some time for that. Do it without a metronome and then with a metronome. And doing this with each individual chord first before you try to do it within a chord progression, like really breaking this down and dividing the challenges like this is really important. The next chord in the progression is an E minor, and this is the exact same as the G. The lowest root note on this chord is the low E string, so your thumb gets the low E string. Okay. So really nothing new here. You just have to kind of shift your mind to like, okay, I'm going back to the exact same feel that I had when I was playing the G major chord, and I'm playing an E minor chord this time. And make sure you have that alternate or contrary motion going there. Thumb down, fingers out, fingers in, thumb back. Okay, so take some time. This one will probably come faster because it's the same as the G. Make sure you have that down and you're accurate with your thumb on that low string. And then the last chord that we have to worry about is a C major chord, and this will be a little bit take a little more time to program in, just because our low root note is this C note, the lowest root note available to us in this particular chord shape on the A string. So thumb on the A string, fingers on the top 3 strings. Just spend some time with that C chord until you're accurately hitting that A string every time, and look back if you need to. And one thing that I should have mentioned in the last lesson is what we're trying to do with this fingerstyle pattern, thumb and fingers, is really just imitated piano, because the bass note is in the left hand, boom, and then the chord is in the right hand, jing, boom, jing, boom, jing. So we're just trying to imitate a piano, and that's really what it ends up sounding like. But the first step to being able to play this through a chord progression, and this is the whole goal of this lesson, is to just get to where you can play this thumb and fingers pattern with each chord in the progression. We'll start to glue them together and put the two challenges of switching between the chords, you know, and then adjusting your hand for the pattern for each chord together in the next lesson. But for now, just divide the challenge. If you need to work on this progression, G on its own, D, E minor, C, do that. Spend some time just going through that to where it's really smooth. And then work on just, not in time yet, just thumb and fingers with each individual chord before we start to try and put them together in the next lesson. And that'll make things a lot easier for you when we get there. The entire point of this lesson is to help you gain a little bit more intentional accuracy with your thumb, so you can put it where it needs to be for each one of these individual chords. If you feel like you're there and ready to go, you can go ahead and move on to the next lesson. If you have any questions that are coming up, you can always email us support@guitarfam.com, or leave a comment on whatever page you're watching this video on, or schedule a private lesson with me. The first one's complimentary. You can do that at guitarfam.com. I'll see you in the next lesson, but here are your assignments first. Number 1, use the alternating thumb and fingers pattern with the open G major chord with and without a metronome. So do it without a metronome first, just to get the coordination down, and then put it within the metronome at about 70 beats per minute. Number 2, use the alternating thumb and fingers pattern with the open D major chord with and without a metronome. Make sure your thumb's on the D string for that. Number 3, use the alternating thumb and fingers pattern with the open E minor chord with and without a metronome. And number 4, use the alternating thumb and fingers pattern with the open C major chord with and without a metronome. Thumbs on the A string for the C. All right, I will see you in the next lesson where we'll put everything together.